Vivienne Hartwell did not announce herself when she walked into a room. That was the first thing people noticed about her, the absence of performance. No sweep of the door, no pause for effect. She simply arrived, observed, and formed her opinion in silence. At 61, she had built Hartwell Capital into one of the most quietly powerful private equity firms in Western Canada. And she had done it the same way she did everything else, by watching people when they thought no one important was looking. Her daughter Petra was 28. She had Vivienne's jaw and her late father's warmth, which was a combination that made her trusting in ways Vivienne sometimes found difficult to watch. Petra had been with Callum for 14 months. He was 33, worked in commercial real estate, and had a smile that arrived slightly before his eyes did. Vivienne had noticed that the first evening Petra brought him to dinner. She had not said anything. She had watched. By the time Petra mentioned that Callum had been offered a senior position at Hartwell Capital, that Petra herself had suggested it, had championed it to the board, Vivienne understood that the situation had moved past the stage of quiet observation. She needed to know who Callum actually was, not who he was at dinners, or at charity events, or in the careful architecture of first impressions. She needed to know who he was when he believed no one was paying attention. She made the call on a Tuesday morning in October. Her assistant arranged the rest. Hartwell Capital's Calgary office occupied 3 floors of a glass tower on 8th Avenue. The building services team was managed through a contract firm, and every 6 months a handful of new staff rotated through. Vivienne asked for a placement. 1 week, starting Monday. Office cleaning. Early shift 5 to 8 in the morning, before the executive floor filled up. The woman who coordinated placements did not ask questions. Vivienne's firm had used the contract agency for 9 years. On Sunday night, Vivienne pulled her silver hair back into a low, plain bun. She found a pair of reading glasses she no longer used. Dark frames, slightly too large. She set out a pair of gray trousers, a white-collared shirt, the kind you could buy in a pack of 3, and a pair of soft-soled shoes. She looked at herself in the mirror for a long time before she turned off the light. She was not afraid of being recognized. The executive floor staff knew her face, but the building services team operated in a different rhythm entirely. They moved through the offices before anyone arrived and left before the day properly started. Vivienne had managed a company for 30 years. She knew exactly how invisible certain people were permitted to be. Monday. 5:12 in the morning. The service elevator opened onto the executive floor, and Vivienne stepped out with a cleaning cart. A woman named Donna beside her, who had the slightly apologetic manner of someone used to training people she suspected wouldn't last. "The executive suites are on the north side," Donna said, pulling on a pair of gloves. "Mr. Bryce's office is the corner one. He comes in early most days, so we usually do his first and move on." Vivienne nodded. She pushed the cart and said nothing. Callum's office was large. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city. Still dark at that hour, the Bow River a faint line of silver below. The desk was mahogany. The bookshelves behind it held titles Vivienne recognized as the kind people bought to be seen owning. There was a framed photograph of Petra on the credenza, smiling at a lake somewhere, her hair loose. Vivienne looked at it once and did not look again. She emptied the wastebasket. She wiped the desk. She moved the way Donna had shown her, efficient and quiet. She was almost finished when she heard the elevator. Callum arrived at 6:14. He was in running clothes, gym bag over one shoulder, phone already at his ear. He walked into his office without acknowledging that anyone was in it. "No, I told you already." His voice was flat, the careful pleasantness he wore at dinner entirely absent. "The Mercer file gets moved before Thursday. I don't care what Sandu thinks. He's not the one making the call." Vivienne continued wiping the windowsill. She kept her back to him. He ended the call and dropped his bag on the chair. Then he seemed to register her presence, the way you register a piece of furniture that has been moved slightly. A mild, impersonal irritation. "How long are you going to be?" he said. "Just finishing up," Vivienne said. She kept her voice low, slightly roughened. She did not turn around. "I need the room." She gathered the cleaning cloth and moved the cart toward the door. He was already at his desk, not watching her leave. She was 3 steps into the hallway when she heard him on the phone again. She bought it completely, told her it was a long-term strategy play. A pause. Hartwell's name opens every door in this city. Once I'm in the family, the access is permanent. Another pause and then a short laugh. She's easy, Dane. She trusts people. That's her problem. Vivienne stood in the hallway. The cart was in front of her. The fluorescent light hummed overhead. She was aware of her own breathing, the slight tightness across her chest, and the fact that her hands, resting on the cart handle, were completely still. She is easy. She trusts people. Vivienne had built a company by understanding risk. She had sat across from men twice her age who'd tried to maneuver her, flatter her, mislead her. She had learned to read the gap between what people said and what they meant. She had applied that skill to balance sheets and to boardrooms and to every major decision of her professional life. She had not thought to apply it in her own home. That was on her. She understood that clearly, standing in that hallway at 6:17 in the morning, with the city still dark outside. She pushed the cart back to the supply room and finished the rest of the shift without incident. Donna showed her how to log the completed rooms. Vivienne logged them correctly. She changed in the locker room on the parkade level, folded the white shirt, and drove home in the gray October light. She did not call Petra that day. She went to her office, ran her regular afternoon meeting, reviewed 2 proposals, and ate a sandwich at her desk at noon. She moved through the day the way she had learned to move through difficult things. Steadily, without urgency, giving herself time to be sure of what she had heard, before she decided what to do with it. She went back Tuesday and Wednesday. On Tuesday, she overheard Callum in the small kitchen on the executive floor, speaking to a junior analyst named Holt. The analyst had made a small error in a client summary. It was a formatting issue, the kind that took 10 minutes to fix. Callum did not address it that way. "This is embarrassing," he said, his voice even but carrying. "Genuinely. You understand that I have to wonder whether you belong on this team." The analyst, young, Vivienne thought, maybe 24, said something she couldn't fully hear. "An apology. I don't need an apology. I need competence." Callum took his coffee and left the kitchen. Vivienne finished wiping down the counter. The analyst stood at the sink for a moment before collecting himself and walking back to his desk. He passed Vivienne without looking at her. She understood that. She had by that point become part of the furniture. On Wednesday morning, Callum was in his office on a video call when Vivienne came in to empty the wastebasket. He waved a hand at her, not looking up, a gesture that meant wait outside. She waited in the doorway. The call went 15 minutes past the time she needed to finish the floor. When he waved her in, finally, he said nothing. No acknowledgement of the wait. He was already on another call. That evening, Vivienne sat in her kitchen with a cup of tea and thought about Petra. She thought about the photograph on the credenza. Petra at the lake, smiling in that way she had, entirely open, entirely unguarded. She thought about 14 months of dinners and the patient, practiced performance of a man who had, apparently, identified her daughter as an access point and worked toward her with deliberate care. She thought about what she was going to say and how Petra was going to receive it, and she understood that this was going to be the harder part. She called on Thursday evening. She asked Petra to come for dinner on Saturday. Just the 2 of them. Petra arrived at 7 with a bottle of Ontario Pinot Noir, and her hair pulled back the way she wore it when she was in a good mood. She looked healthy. She looked happy. Vivienne took the wine and hugged her daughter and felt the specific difficulty of knowing something that was going to change how that happiness looked. They ate. They talked about Petra's work. She was an environmental consultant, focused on watershed restoration, and she had been managing a project near Red Deer that had been going well. Vivienne listened carefully, the way she always listened to Petra. The technical details, the complications, the small victories she was clearly proud of. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Vivienne brought tea. She set the cups down on the coffee table and sat across from her daughter. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I need you to hear it out before you respond." Petra went still in the way she had since she was small, a complete attentiveness that had always made Vivienne feel that her daughter was fundamentally serious, even when she was being funny. "Okay," she said. Vivienne told her everything. She started with the decision to take the placement. She described the office on Monday morning, the cart, Donna's instructions. She told Petra exactly what she had heard Callum say, and the order in which she had heard it, and the words he had used. She told her about Tuesday in the kitchen and what he had said to the analyst. She told her about Wednesday and the 15-minute wait in the doorway. She did not editorialize, she reported. She had been in enough difficult meetings to know that the facts, plainly stated, were more effective than any framing she could put around them. When she finished, Petra was quiet. She had her hands around her teacup. She was looking at a point somewhere past Vivienne's shoulder. He said she's easy, Petra said finally. Not a question. Yes, he said I trust people, like it's a flaw. Vivienne said nothing. How long were you there? 3 days. Petra set the cup down. You went in as a cleaner? Yes. For 3 days, I wanted to be certain. Petra was quiet again. Vivienne let her be. She had learned this about her daughter over 28 years. That Petra processed things at her own pace and did not need prompting, and that the worst thing you could do was to fill the silence with reassurance before she had finished thinking. I knew something was off, Petra said finally. Her voice was careful, measured. There was something, I couldn't name it. I kept thinking I was imagining it, that I was being. She stopped. He told me I overthink things. Vivienne looked at her daughter. He said it a lot actually, that I was too analytical, that I needed to trust my feelings more and my instincts less. Petra paused, which I now understand was a very specific thing to say to someone who works in environmental assessment. Yes, Vivienne said. I thought about that too. Petra looked at her then. There was grief on her face, real grief, the kind that sits under anger and surfaces later, when the immediate things have been handled. But there was also something else. Something resolute. You should have told me sooner, Petra said. When you first had doubts. You're right. I should have. Vivienne held her gaze. I didn't want to be the mother who interfered. I've been watching instead of speaking, and I'm sorry for that. Petra was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up her tea. I'm going to need a few days. Take whatever you need. I'm not saying I don't believe you. I'm saying I need to process the fact that I spent 14 months. She stopped again. She set the cup down. I need a few days. Of course. Petra left at 10. Vivienne stood at the window and watched the headlights of her car disappear down the street. The neighborhood was quiet. A neighbor's maple had gone entirely red, brilliant against the dark. Petra called on Monday. She had gone through her own records over the weekend. Emails, calendar entries. A project proposal Callum had helped her draft for a community stakeholder meeting back in the spring. She had found 3 instances where a contact of hers had subsequently become a contact of his. She had found an email thread, forwarded from her account to his personal address, that she had no memory of forwarding. She had also spoken, on Sunday morning, to the junior analyst from Callum's team, a man named Holt, who had been in Petra's MBA cohort years before. She had called him about something unrelated, and the conversation had turned. He had been careful, but he had confirmed enough. I've already spoken to a lawyer, Petra told Vivienne. I'm ending it this week. There are some things I want to document first. The forwarded emails especially. Do you want me to be there? Vivienne asked. No, I want to handle it. A pause. But I want you to know that I'm not angry at you for doing what you did. I understand why. I know I'm angry at myself for not trusting what I felt. Her voice was steady. That's what I'm working on. Callum took it badly. He showed up unannounced at Petra's apartment on Wednesday evening with a specific performance prepared. Regret, disbelief, a version of events that repositioned his phone conversations as jokes taken out of context. Petra listened. She had, by that point, already met with an employment lawyer and documented what she needed to document. She told him clearly and without drama that she had made her decision, that there was nothing further to discuss, and that she would need him to leave. He did not leave immediately. He stood in the doorway and said things that were intended to destabilize, that Petra was letting her mother run her life, that Vivienne had always disapproved of him, that this was control dressed up as protection. Petra said, I know what I heard, and I know what I found. You can go now. He went. She told Vivienne about it on the phone that night, her voice even slightly tired. He tried the mother angle, she said. I expected that. I know you did. A short silence. He wasn't entirely wrong that you're protective. No, Vivienne said. He wasn't. There's a difference between protection and interference. There is. You didn't interfere, Petra said. You found out the truth and you told me. What I did with it was my decision. She paused. I need you to let it stay that way. It was always your decision, Vivienne said. That's why I waited. In December, Petra's Red Deer project received provincial approval, a restoration plan for a stretch of riparian habitat that had been degraded by agricultural runoff. It was the kind of work she had been building toward for years. Vivienne read the project summary that Petra sent her, all 42 pages of it, and felt a specific pride that had nothing to do with Hartwell capital or family reputation, or any of the things she had spent most of her career measuring. She felt proud of who her daughter was. They had dinner on the third Friday of the month, the way they had for years. Vivienne made pasta. Petra brought bread from the Italian bakery on 17th. They ate at the kitchen table with the lights low, and the snow coming down outside. And they talked about the project, and about a documentary Petra had watched, and about the neighbor's maple that had lost its leaves now, and stood bare against the winter sky. At some point the conversation slowed into the comfortable quiet that had always been possible between them. Not awkward, not empty, just the ease of two people who did not need to fill every moment. Petra looked up from her plate. You know what I keep thinking about? What? You in that uniform, at 6 in the morning, with the cart. She shook her head slowly. You didn't have to do that. I know you could have hired someone, asked around. Found another way, I could have. Petra looked at her. Why didn't you? Vivienne thought about it. The quiet of the executive floor in the early morning. The hum of the fluorescent light. The cart handle under her hands, completely still. Because I needed to see it myself, she said. Some things you can't ask someone else to find out for you. Petra was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded, slowly, the way she did when something had settled into place. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and steady over the city, over the bare maple, over the long flat streets of the neighborhood. The way it always did in Calgary in December, indifferent and clean and covering everything equally.